6 hours in hell. The doctor reaches for the zipper on the body bag. Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez lies motionless inside, bathed in his own blood. His intestines are exposed. His eyes are caked shut with dried blood. His jaw is broken. He cannot speak. He cannot move. 37 separate wounds cover his body. 7 gunshot wounds. 28 shrapnel holes. Bayonet slashes through both arms. A rifle butt has shattered the back of his skull. The physician places his hand on Benavidez's chest, feeling for a heartbeat. He finds nothing. He shakes his head and begins to pull the zipper closed. Benavidez does the only thing he can think of. He gathers every ounce of strength remaining in his shattered body and spits directly into the doctor's face. This is the story of how a sharecropper's son from Texas spent 6 hours in hell and lived to tell about it. Roy Perez Benavidez was born on August 5, 1935, in Lindenau, Texas, a tiny town near Cuero. His father, Salvador, was a Mexican sharecropper. His mother, Teresa, was a Yaqui Indian. The family had nothing. When Roy was 2 years old, his father died of tuberculosis. 5 years later, his mother followed. By the time Roy was 7, both parents were gone. He and his younger brother, Roger, moved to El Campo to live with their grandfather, Uncle Nicholas, and aunt. 8 cousins already crowded the small house. 10 people total, sharing whatever they could scrape together. Roy shined shoes at the local bus station for pennies. He worked farms in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado, picking sugar beets and cotton under the scorching sun. He labored in a tire shop. He did whatever it took to eat. School didn't work. He struggled with the language, struggled with the books, struggled to see any future in those classrooms. He dropped out in 7th grade. In 1952, at 17, Roy Benavidez joined the Texas Army National Guard. 3 years later, in June 1955, he transitioned to active duty Army. Everything changed. He completed airborne training in 1959 and married his childhood sweetheart, Hilaria Coy. The Army sent him to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He was building something, a career, a life, a reason to keep moving forward. In 1965, the Army sent Benavidez to South Vietnam as an advisor to an Army of the Republic of Vietnam infantry regiment. His first tour, his first real taste of combat. On a solo reconnaissance patrol, he stepped on a landmine. The explosion shattered his back. He woke up in the Philippine Islands at Clark Air Force Base, paralyzed from the waist down. They flew him to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, where doctors delivered the verdict. The damage to his spine was too severe. He would never walk again. They began preparing his medical discharge papers. Roy Benavidez refused to accept it. Every night after the lights went out and the doctors went home, he pulled himself out of bed, against medical orders, against common sense, against the prognosis of men with decades of training. Other soldiers in his ward watched him. Many were amputees. Many were paralyzed permanently. They encouraged him. They understood what the doctors couldn't, that some men simply refused to quit. Benavidez crawled to the wall using his elbows and chin. He propped himself against it and tried to lift himself. He started by wiggling his toes, then his feet, then after months of excruciating practice that often left him in tears, pushing himself up the wall with his ankles and legs, inches at a time, centimeters of progress measured in agony. The doctors arrived months later with his final discharge papers, ready to send him home. Benavidez stood up out of bed and walked across the room. In July 1966, after over a year of hospitalization, he walked out of Fort Sam Houston with Hilaria at his side. The Army compressed 18 months of physical therapy into 6 and sent him back to Fort Bragg. He could barely walk at first. By the end of 6 months, he could run 10 miles with a rucksack. Benavidez returned to Fort Bragg and began training for Army Special Forces. The elite, the Green Berets. Once qualified and accepted, he became a member of the 5th Special Forces Group and the Studies and Observations Group. In January 1968, despite continuing pain from his wounds, Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez returned to South Vietnam for his second tour. His comrades gave him the radio code name he wore with pride, Tango Mike Mike, that mean Mexican. May 2nd, 1968, forward operating base at Loc Ninh, South Vietnam, near the Cambodian border. Benavidez is walking back from Catholic Mass when he hears the panicked call over the radio. The voice is cracking with desperation. The sound of gunfire in the background is like a popcorn machine, constant, overwhelming, deadly. A 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team has been inserted into a dense jungle area west of Loc Ninh to gather intelligence about confirmed large-scale enemy activity. 3 American Green Berets, 9 Montagnard tribesmen. They dropped into a hornet's nest. The team met heavy enemy resistance almost immediately. A North Vietnamese army battalion, between 1,000 and 1,500 soldiers. The Special Forces team is outnumbered nearly 100 to 1. 3 helicopters from the 240th Assault Helicopter Company have already attempted extraction. All 3 were driven off by intense small arms and anti-aircraft fire. Benavidez recognizes voices on the radio. One of them is Sergeant First Class Leroy Wright. They had served together in the 82nd Airborne. They went through Special Forces selection together. Just 1 month earlier, Wright saved Benavidez's life on patrol. The call comes again. Get us out of here. Benavidez doesn't hesitate. He doesn't wait for orders. He doesn't ask permission. He grabs a medical aid bag. He grabs his combat knife. Nothing else. No rifle, no grenades, no body armor, just a knife and a bag of bandages. He runs to the helicopter that's returning from the failed extraction attempt, wounded crew members being offloaded, the aircraft being assessed for damage. He climbs aboard. The pilot looks at him. "You sure about this?" "I'm in," Benavidez says. The helicopter lifts off. Benavidez knows what he's flying into. 3 helicopters couldn't land. The team is surrounded by an enemy battalion. The jungle is a killing ground. "When I got on that copter," he would later recall, "little did I know we were going to spend 6 hours in hell." The helicopter arrives over the battle zone. The jungle below is alive with muzzle flashes. Tracer rounds arc through the air. The sound of the firefight is a constant roar even over the helicopter's rotors. The pilot tries to land. Impossible. The volume of fire is too intense. The North Vietnamese have heavy machine guns and anti-aircraft weapons positioned around the trapped team. Realizing that all the team members are either dead or wounded and unable to move to the pickup zone, Benavidez directs the aircraft to a nearby clearing. The pilot hovers. The helicopter cannot land. Benavidez jumps from the hovering Huey, 75 yards from the trap team, 75 yards of open ground covered by heavy enemy fire. He runs. Before he travels 20 yards, a bullet tears through his right leg. He stumbles but keeps moving. A hand grenade explodes near his head. Shrapnel rips into his face, his head, his back. Blood pours into his eyes. He keeps running, praying aloud to his creator. Benavidez covers the 75 yards and reaches the team's position. 4 Montagnards are dead. The remaining men are wounded, scattered, pinned down by relentless enemy fire. Benavidez takes charge immediately. He repositions team members to create a defensive perimeter. He grabs an AK-47 from one of the dead Montagnards and begins directing their fire. He throws smoke canisters to mark positions for the helicopters. He stabilizes the wounded, applies pressure to bleeding wounds, administers morphine, all while enemy fire intensifies around him. A helicopter comes in for extraction. Benavidez leads the walking wounded toward it, providing covering fire. He's running alongside the aircraft as it moves to pick up team members. When more enemy fire erupts, he needs to recover classified documents from the team leader's body. The information cannot fall into enemy hands. He hurries toward the body as the enemy fire intensifies. When he reaches the leader, A burst of small arms fire tears into Benavidez's abdomen. Another grenade explodes. Shrapnel shreds his back. He's coughing up blood now, but he secures the classified documents. At nearly the same moment, the helicopter pilot is hit, mortally wounded. The helicopter crashes and burns. Benavidez, despite multiple wounds and coughing up blood from the shot that tore through his stomach, crawls to the downed aircraft. He pulls wounded men from the wreckage. He gathers the stunned survivors into a defensive perimeter around the burning helicopter. The North Vietnamese close in. Mortar rounds begin falling. The enemy believes they can overrun the position, finish the survivors. Benavidez has other plans. He distributes water and ammunition to the remaining men. He calls in tactical air strikes, directing F-4 Phantom jets and helicopter gunships to strafe enemy positions. Some of the strikes are danger close, so close the concussions shake the ground beneath them. The air support pushes the North Vietnamese back temporarily. Another extraction helicopter braves the fire and comes in to land. Benavidez begins moving wounded men to the aircraft. He hoists one seriously wounded American over his shoulder and lurches toward the waiting helicopter. A North Vietnamese soldier, playing dead among the bodies, suddenly leaps up. He clubs Benavidez across the face with the butt of his AK-47. The impact shatters Benavidez's jaw and knocks him to the ground. The enemy soldier lunges forward with his bayonet. Benavidez, lying on his back, grabs the bayonet blade with his right hand. The blade slices deep into his palm. The soldier drives the bayonet through Benavidez's left arm. Benavidez pulls the enemy soldier forward with his bayonet-impaled left arm and drives his own knife into the man's chest. The North Vietnamese soldier dies on top of him. Benavidez pulls the bayonet out of his arm, pushes the body off, and somehow struggles back to his feet. He continues dragging the wounded American toward the helicopter. He spots two more North Vietnamese soldiers rushing the aircraft from an angle the door gunner cannot see. Benavidez grabs an AK-47 and drops both enemy soldiers. He makes another trip back into the perimeter, brings out the team's interpreter, goes back again for another wounded man. His intestines are exposed now. He's holding them in with one hand while dragging wounded men with the other. One final check. He has to make sure all classified material is recovered. Maps, SOI cards, notes, nothing can be left behind. He stumbles through the perimeter one last time, nearly blind from blood running into his eyes. Then, and only then, does he allow himself to be pulled into the extraction helicopter. The helicopter lifts off. Benavidez lies against another badly wounded soldier, Larry Mousseau. He holds Mousseau's hand. Just before they land at the medevac hospital, Benavidez feels Mousseau's fingers dig into his palm, his arm twitching and jumping as if electric current is pouring through his body. Then Mousseau is still. At Loc Ninh, the wounded are examined one by one. Benavidez is so immobile, they place him with the dead. His friend Jerry Cottingham screams, "That's Benavidez. Get a doc." The doctor arrives, places his hand on Benavidez's chest to feel for a heartbeat. Finds nothing, pronounces him dead. The physician begins to zip up the body bag. Benavidez spits in his face. The doctor jerks back, startled. They pull Benavidez from the body bag. The doctor still doesn't believe he'll survive. No one does. The injuries are catastrophic. 7 major gunshot wounds. 1 bullet entered his back, destroyed his right lung, and exited just beneath his heart. 28 shrapnel wounds in his back, neck, head, legs, feet, and buttocks. Both arms slashed by bayonet. His right hand nearly severed. His jaw shattered. The back of his skull smashed by a rifle butt. 37 separate wounds total from 6 hours of continuous combat. They evacuate him to Saigon for emergency surgery. The doctors don't expect him to make it through the night. Roy Benavidez proves them wrong again. Benavidez spent almost a year in hospitals recovering. The wounds would take that long to heal, though some never fully did. On September 10th, 1968, while still at Brooke Army Medical Center at Fort Sam Houston, He received a visitor, Lieutenant General William Westmoreland, Chief of Staff of the United States Army. Westmoreland presented Benavidez with the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. The citation began, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations involving conflict with an armed hostile force in the Republic of Vietnam." His commander had wanted to nominate him for the Medal of Honor immediately, but Benavidez's condition was so grave they weren't sure he would survive long enough to receive it. The Distinguished Service Cross could be processed faster. Benavidez survived. He returned to duty. In 1976, he retired from the Army at the rank of Master Sergeant after 21 years of service. Years passed. In 1973, Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Drake learned more details about Benavidez's actions on May 2nd and insisted his Distinguished Service Cross should be upgraded to the Medal of Honor. By then, the time limit on the medal had expired. An appeal to Congress resulted in an exemption, but the Army Decorations Board denied the upgrade. They required an eyewitness account from someone present during the action. Benavidez believed there were no living witnesses. The day had become known among those who knew as 6 hours in hell, and he thought everyone who could testify was dead. But there was a witness, Brian O'Connor, the team's radio man. He had been severely wounded, evacuated so quickly that his superiors never fully debriefed him. Benavidez thought he was dead. O'Connor had been living in Fiji. In 1980, while on holiday in Australia, he picked up a newspaper. An article from an El Campo, Texas newspaper had been reprinted by the international press. It told the story of Roy Benavidez. O'Connor immediately contacted Benavidez and submitted a 10-page detailed account of everything that happened on May 2nd, 1968. The necessary eyewitness testimony finally existed. On February 24, 1981, President Ronald Reagan presented Roy Benavidez with the Medal of Honor in the courtyard of the Pentagon. Reagan turned to the assembled press and said, "If the story of his heroism were a movie script, you would not believe it." Then he read the official citation, all of it, every word documenting 6 hours in hell. After receiving the Medal of Honor, President Reagan asked Benavidez to speak to young people across America. Benavidez took the responsibility seriously. He visited schools, military bases, and runaway shelters. He stressed the importance of education, the value of service, the danger of gangs. He told young people that the real heroes were the ones who gave their lives for their country. "I don't like to be called a hero," he often said. "I just did what I was trained to do." But the men whose lives he saved on May 2nd knew better. 8 soldiers survived that day because Roy Benavidez refused to quit. Leroy Wright and Larry Mousseau did not survive, but others did. They lived to return home, to see their families again, because one man jumped from a helicopter armed only with a knife and a medical bag. In 1983, Benavidez fought one more battle, this time against bureaucracy. The Reagan administration had begun cutting disability benefits for Vietnam veterans. Benavidez, wearing his Medal of Honor, testified before the House Select Committee on Aging. "The administration that put this medal around my neck is curtailing my benefits," he told Congress. He won. An administrative law judge ruled he should continue receiving payments. The review process was reformed to become more humane and compassionate. Roy Benavidez lived in El Campo, Texas, with Hilaria and their 3 children, Noel, Yvette, and Denise. He spent his retirement speaking, mentoring, and fighting for other veterans. On November 29, 1998, Roy Benavidez died at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. He was 63. His right leg had been amputated in October due to complications from diabetes. He suffered respiratory failure. He was buried at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery, the same place where doctors once told him he would never walk again. Several schools in Texas were named for him. A National Guard armory, an Army Reserve Center. In 2003, the Navy christened the USNS Benavidez, a cargo ship that bears his name across the oceans. The story of Roy Benavidez is not just about 6 hours of combat. It's about a life spent refusing to accept limits. Doctors said he would never walk. He ran 10 miles with a rucksack. 3 helicopters were driven off by enemy fire. He jumped from the 4th armed only with a knife. 37 wounds should have killed him. He lived for 30 more years. Every sentence of his Medal of Honor citation sounds impossible. Running 75 yards through withering fire while wounded, dragging half a team to safety, fighting for 6 hours with gunshot wounds to his abdomen, shrapnel in his back, a bayonet through his arm, killing enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat while holding his intestines inside his body, refusing to be evacuated until every wounded man was safe and every piece of classified material was recovered. If it were fiction, no one would believe it. But it happened on May 2nd, 1968, in the jungle west of Loc Ninh, South Vietnam. The boy who shined shoes at the bus station became a man who embodied the warrior ethos that every modern soldier learns. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. Roy Benavidez lived those words. When living them meant 6 hours in hell, the soldiers in that hospital ward at Fort Sam Houston, the ones who watched him crawl to the wall night after night, understood something the doctors missed. Some men simply cannot be broken, not by injury, not by pain, not by the verdict of experts who measure possibility in medical terms. Those men, paralyzed and missing limbs, cheered quietly when Benavidez took another inch up that wall. They knew what they were witnessing, not defiance of medical science, but proof that the human spirit sometimes transcends the limitations of flesh and bone. Roy Benavidez spent his life transcending limitations, poverty, loss, injury, prejudice, death itself, staring up from inside a body bag. The doctors who opened that bag saw 37 wounds and wondered how anyone could survive. The soldiers who fought beside him that day knew exactly how. Because when your brothers need you, when the mission demands it, when everything inside you is screaming to stop but the men around you need one more trip into the fire, you make that trip. That's not heroism to men like Roy Benavidez. That's duty. And duty is a language the sharecropper's son from Lindenau, Texas, understood better than most. The citation ends with simple words. Sergeant Benavidez's gallant choice to join voluntarily in the face of withering enemy fire and his refusal to be stopped despite numerous severe wounds saved the lives of at least 8 men. At least 8 men went home to their families because Roy Benavidez spent 6 hours in hell and refused to die. That's his legacy, not the 37 wounds or the Medal of Honor or the ship that bears his name. 8 men, maybe more, living full lives they would not have lived, raising children who would not have been born, creating futures that would not have existed, all because one man heard a call for help and said, "I'm in." That's the lesson Roy Benavidez leaves behind. Not that heroism is superhuman, but that ordinary humans are capable of extraordinary things when they refuse to abandon each other, when they choose duty over survival, when they understand that some things matter more than walking away alive. The real heroes are the ones who gave their lives for their country, Benavidez always said. But the men who lived because of him would disagree. They knew the truth. Heroes are the ones who run toward hell when everyone else is running away, who fight for 6 hours when the first wound should have stopped them, who hold their brothers close even when holding means dying beside them. Roy Benavidez did that. A sharecropper's son who couldn't finish 7th grade became the embodiment of everything the Medal of Honor represents: gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. 6 hours in hell, 37 wounds, 8 lives saved, and 1 spit in a doctor's face to prove he wasn't finished yet. That's Roy Benavidez, that mean Mexican, Tango Mike Mike, the man who refused to quit,